I'm Sue Schrader. I'm an independent publicist and I also work for an artist management company called Blind Ambition. So I think the thing we should start talking about are the different tools that everyone needs to help promote themselves. And for me, I think one of the most important tools is your pitch. And quite honestly, whether it's you calling about your band or you're a publicist calling about somebody else, you probably have about 15 seconds at the most to get Alex's attention when you call him. So I guess maybe I thought we could talk about how do you craft that pitch, and Alex, what do you like to hear and what do you not like to hear?
Actually, first I got to tell you that I love a pitch in email more than a pitch in phone call. Partially because one of the great things about email is that I can deal with it when I've got time for it. And a phone call, obviously you're with me right now, and I may have something on deadline, and I don't really want to be a jerk to you, but I'm also aware the clock is running, and so I don't quite have the time to give you I necessarily would like to. No question, phone calls are good, but if you can put it in writing, two things happen. One of which is it makes it a little bit easier for me, and if it's easier for me, it's better for you. But the other thing is, it gives you time to think about what you have to say, and give me a reason to be interested in what you're doing. When you're pitching, just saying I'm here and I'm from this place is okay, but that's not pretty gripping. Right now, since I edit from here in New Orleans, that 3/4 of the pitches that cross my desk will tell me that my client is living in San Diego, but he grew up in New Orleans. Or my client is living in Indianapolis, but he visited New Orleans twice when he was a teenager. Hey, Laura. I've already introduced you from afar, so you can just step right in. So everybody wants to tell me what the pitch is, and the pitch is almost always, if they're not from here, the pitch is, we are loosely connected to there. That's okay, but give me a little better than that. Because what you want to tell me, what you're telling any editor, is not only who you are, but why somebody, why my readers would be interested. I mean, obviously, someone's saying, here from New Orleans, my guy's got a New Orleans connection. That helps. That's a start. I can go for a little better than that, but that gets you in the game. So what you're trying to tell me is not just I exist, but a reason why I should be interested. And you could probably craft that message a little better if you sit down and write it, or have someone sit down and write it for you rather than call me and ramble through that I'm from here, or I used to be from there, or I visited there, or I really like pictures of there, or I saw the Big Easy on VHS, something like that.
Well, let me ask you this. Recently, what has been a good pitch? I mean, if I'm sitting in the audience and I'm like, well, what do I say about myself? I mean, is there something, like someone recently told me, I said, well, what kind of music do you do? And he goes, well, we're country music for city people. And you go, oh, well, and you're like, well, I want to hear that. So I guess, my question is, maybe Shirley, what's, a pitch you've made lately that's got people to perk up, or just some examples so people know.
Well, it's actually taken us a little while to perfect the right pitch, because you never know. The one thing you don't want to do is be too wordy and give them, like you're saying, too much useless information. You want to get right to the meat of it. Like, let's say, for example, I actually talked to a band manager that has a rock band in a sea of hip-hop, and which I believe is Philadelphia, and how you make yourself stand out in an area where you may not actually do that well. Then if you've accomplished that, then that's something that I might add to the pitch. If you've had brushes with fame, so to speak, then absolutely I will add those to the pitch before. Like, we do a lot of Fox morning shows, and if I'll tell Fox in, one area that, oh yeah, we've done, Good Morning Memphis, Good Day New York, Good Day Atlanta, then they'll listen to you. At least you're not a novice at that point. So anything that makes you sound like you're already in the game is going to get somebody's attention.
One thing Actually, one that I got the other day that was a quick one was it came by Facebook, and it was a Zydeco artist who sent us a note saying, by the way, I just cut a Zydeco Christian Zydeco album and played the other day one show here to 1,200 people. And I was like, you know what? Since no one has, I haven't heard yet of Christian Zydeco, so I called a writer in Lafayette and said, find me 500 words on that. I'm interested. And so, something I didn't expect, something that's curious. Okay, let's go. Let's see what we got there. And that one came in simply. So I mean, that wasn't a long pitch. That was, that was about 80 words. So that was a nice find, and it worked.
Well, and sometimes what we'll do too, we just get a feature article for one of the bands in Dubuque, Iowa. And when we were looking at the site, at first my press intern was like, oh, this is just an events announcement site. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a magazine. And he's asked to send Mike an email. And he's like, well, shouldn't we email the editor? And I said, no, email Mike. If he's interested, then he'll talk to the editor. So sometimes it's good to go with a person you can actually touch as opposed to the big cheese. But in some instances, the big cheese is where you want to go to. So you've got to learn which one you're dealing with and which situation is going to work.
Go ahead. Okay,
I
Laura?
wanted to add a story of a pitch that didn't work for me to a big cheese. And it was also because I didn't have the right product for him, but I was pitching a traditional jazz band to David Frick, who's the editor at Rolling Stone magazine. And fortunately, I got him on the phone, which is half the battle. And I was like, oh my God, David, I got you. I was stumbling a little, which you don't want to do. So I'm kind of giving you guys what not to do example. And he was like, yeah. I said, well, hi, this is Laura. I'm calling from New Orleans. I'm calling about this band. They're awesome. They got this new release, and this is really incredible. And he was like, well, we don't do jazz, at Rolling Stone magazine. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I said, well, are you coming to Jazz Fest? I started to talk to him just in terms of like, okay, now I'm going to go to you and personally just talk to you and get to know you better now that my pitch is not working. And he was like, yeah, I'm coming to Jazz Fest. I love New Orleans. I love hanging out there. I really like Quintron and the Spellcaster Lounge and all this craziness. And I was like, all right. I said, well, if you get a chance in your schedule to come to see the band, come and check it out. We'll put you on the list. And so he said, okay, all right, cool. Well, keep in touch. And I was like, all right, I will. I didn't get a story, but I feel like I developed a relationship with a very key writer at a magazine. So hopefully when I have the rock band that I can pitch to him, he'll take my call. So just do your homework. Right. The jazz band records with the rock band. So I think the lesson is really to do your homework as to who you're pitching as well and what they're interested in. Because if they're not interested, they're not interested. But the opportunity still exists to develop a relationship.
And to pick up on that and what Shirley said, pitching writers is a great idea. Pitching freelancers who write for a magazine is a great way to go because first off, you might pitch one story and it might not be that compelling, but that the writer knows the band or is interested in the band and hears how to spin it into something that would be a better pitch. And then you also and the writer, if the writer wants to get in the magazine, they have a financial interest, and they also have sort of a resume interest. So they want to get this in. So they're thinking about how to pitch. So the story now has a champion. So somebody who already has connections to the magazine and may also know how to talk to the editor and pitch a story. There are some writers who will pitch me a story and I don't necessarily hear it, but the writer usually comes up with something worthwhile. So I'm going to go with it because they usually find something even if it's not obvious in the pitch. So besides shooting at the top, Find out, check the masthead, find out who else writes. I started as a freelancer, and there were a lot, and there's a point at which, since I like my freelancers, I don't say this in a way to sell them out or make them seem cheap or grubbing or in any way kind of anything there, but they're so excited to be in the game. The fact that someone's sending them CDs, the fact that they're now on mailing lists, revs them up. They feel one step closer to wherever they hope to get, and so in finding freelancers who are interested in your band is money, and that's someone who will go pitching for you and probably has as good a chance, if not a better chance, than you of landing the story. So, something to think about.
I have a question for you, Alex. So say, I know you said you prefer email. So I email you a pitch, I don't hear anything back. So I wait a couple days, then I call you, I leave you a voicemail. I don't hear anything. So then I email you again, and I don't hear anything. And then I email you again. How many times can I contact you without hearing back before you're going to get mad at me? Like, what is your standard, oh my God, this girl's like completely annoying. How many times is it fair for people to call you, knowing that you're a busy guy?
You 75.
Well, the
But yes,
average person, before it gets...
I think after about 3, you can kind of 3 or 4. You can figure that. So no, because editors see them. I mean, it's not like most of it went by and I didn't notice. That like in my case, a lot of it's pretty simple. That we have been, we're in New Orleans first, Louisiana second, Roots Music third magazine, and so I can pretty quickly see it's not A, B, or C. It's a lovely thought, but there's not much I can do with it. Coming to town helps, and coming to town will help more. We're actually in the process of changing our website, and when we relaunch it, or when the redesign is launched, we're going to start doing daily content as well, which makes it easier to preview bands coming to town, and that opens up some spots because daily content, daily eats content, and so the more I will need a lot more content than I had, so I'll have more spots than I once had. But in general, if I didn't bite in the first 2 or 3 pitches, it means I'm really not that into it. And I saw it in 3 times. I saw it or heard it. It's not moving me.
Plan B.
Yes.
Plan B.
Yeah.
I
Start
think
hitting the freelancers.
In that scenario, it's real important to not get mad and to not to give up and to not leave a bad message or just get angry, because it's a natural thing as a human being to go, God, I called you 3 times and you haven't called me back. It's really it's just check it on your list and go no answer or no response, sent 3 emails, so that you're keeping a track record. I have dropped things off at Alex's office. Not that I encourage that.
No.
But there are ways to continue to sell your message, but without getting discouraged or getting mad. Because once you get mad, then he'll never pick up the phone, and then you'll get that reputation like, oh, don't answer the phone. Well, banned, which they exist.
And one of the things that's actually handy to do, and I try to be better than I used to be, is a lot of editors don't know the situation you're in as a publicist. Mm-hmm. One time I was at a conference and a publicist I dealt with said, I didn't hear from you about this one. And I said, yeah, I felt bad, but I wasn't that into it. And she's like, in the future, actually, can you tell me, because whoever the client is wants to know that I made contact, and even if what I got back from you was 1 word, pass, at least I have evidence I reached out to you, and so often the multiple reach outs are are partially trying to get the job, get the story, but it's also at some point it becomes a CYA, and periodically telling the person you're dealing with that becomes valuable, because a lot of people don't realize that I've discovered, and there's no question. I now just type pass on a lot of stuff, and it's a whole lot easier. I feel sorry in some cases I can't do it, but at least I can I don't feel bad. I'm at least giving you a record, and I'm not having to spend time explaining feel like if I write anything longer, I feel like I had to explain why I'm not into it, and I don't have time to explain why I'm not into a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So
That's really difficult, but it's really important to us as publicists, because I recently had a client who didn't want to pay me after the job was over, and I'm like, look, I can't force people to take you. That's one thing that I think sometimes bands fail to understand. You're all very talented, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, but what you're doing may not be for this magazine or this TV show. Like the Fox channels, again, I've got one that turned down one band and just jumped all over the next one because that's what's hot in their community right now. So you have to keep that in mind too, which means you've got to do a little research before you actually start reaching out to people.
Okay, well, moving on with the different tools that everyone needs. I'd like to talk about press kits. And one, what should go in the press kit? And two, should they be electronic or should you have hard copies as well? So, anybody want to?
Both. It's going to depend on the outlet you're going after, and some of them will actually, after the fact, like 365 Inc., where we're getting the feature article, he took the band from email links, he listened to them, looked at pictures, read their bio, and he's like, yeah, I'd love to cover this. Can you send me a pack? So then I sent him a formal press kit.
And what was in the press kit?
The press kit, my press kits include an 8x10 glossy black and white, a one sheet, which will include any and all airplay, press quotes, that sort of thing. And then I'll have separate sheet of press quotes. One thing that we have started adding, we probably use that more on the booking side though, is a list of their tour dates. But to me, that helps people to recognize that you're serious about this, that you're out there pursuing it, and that people are interested in you. So all of that is going to help you to make you more interesting to them. So, and then I actually have gotten kits from bands before where they just took a lot of pieces of paper and put them in an envelope and sent them to me. Guess what? I'm not looking at that. What we do is we organize it. We put it in a small flat binder that has a place for the business card, and then put the cover letter on top, and it's ready to go. And a lot of people don't think about a cover letter, but that's very important as well, even if you've already spoken with the person, because they get hundreds of them every day. So you've got to make sure that, hey, I'm the one that you said you were going to cover, and make sure they know who you are. So that's what the cover letter is for too. And again, try to keep it very brief so that they're not spending hours going through your paperwork.
Actually, I tend to like stuff electronic. My filing system for email is way better than my filing system for paper. And since so much of what I do is going to go, if I need a photo, if it's a glossy, I've got to scan it. Whereas if it's on your website, I can get it. So I can just move it straight from there to a file, so it's easy enough. So my preference is frequently, sort of an email pitch that has usually the lead is whatever the short bio or the short story of the record, what the selling points are, and then usually where to go find more. And tour dates are really important, particularly if you're not local, because again, it might be interesting, but if it's not coming to town, there's not much I can do with it. Whereas an out-of-town band whose pitch is interesting, I like what they are, and they're coming here, okay, I can put someone on that. So tour dates help editors see if there's any reason to do this, or see a way to make it timely. That evergreens are nice, but evergreens often become everbrowns and ever dies because the fact that they don't have any particular time frame means they can always be pushed to the back seat, and eventually they get pushed to the back long enough, and you lose interest. So, so handling them, I like to be able to find them that way. The single most important thing is it's amazing how many bands still don't have on their website, what would be on the bio, is frequently not on the website. The bio on your website is static. It's the same thing it was 3 years ago when you had 2 different members in the band. And how many bands don't have a good JPEG pub photo on the website? I mean, so often I have bands who will complain, why don't we ever get ink? Why don't we ever get ink? And I'll go look for, whenever I get an occasion to put a picture in, I'll go for, like, for instance, French Quarter Festival, when it's here, has a lot of bands. Since it's really close to Jazz Fest, when we do anything with it, I almost always try to have bands that aren't playing Jazz Fest, so one, I don't run the pictures of the same people twice, and also so I can pay attention to some people who don't always get attention. And if you want to hear me curse, be in the office when I'm trying to do the art hunt for that. Yeah. Because I'm going through and I'm finding, and I start, I know why this person is needing where I can't find a damn photo for this person. I know why this person's career is what it is. I can't find a photo. This person doesn't even have a website. And you can just go through and you can see how many people, can't take care of basic business. It's like they want the ink, but they want the ink while they stay home and play Madden. And it's like, I got an idea. If I care more about your career than you do, then we've got a problem. And you care about your career when you're smoking dope, or when you're or when you're with the band, or you're in a rehearsal room. I got an idea. How about you care about it when you're playing Madden and take that time? How about when you care about it when you're sleeping till 11? Those are hours from 9 to 11 are 2 really good hours. You could do basic maintenance on your website. Treating your website like it's something that you did it once in 2002, and from there on you don't need to touch it again is foolishness. And then to expect somebody else to care more than you do is that really doesn't actually work very well.
Yeah.
As you can see, I kind of wind up.
Right, because it's a serious.
Because then I'm the a-hole.
Right, and to put someone like Alex in a pressure on a deadline situation, looking for a picture, it's really a bad situation, And as a publicist, I've been in that situation where send me the picture, and we're scrambling looking for the high-res JPEG. I think I've been fortunate enough to see the shift in from hard press kits being sent with the glossy picture, the bio, the CD inside, to now it really being about electronic and it being available. Send someone a link. Here's the MP3. Here's the high-res JPEG. Here's the bio. By the way, these are the real interesting points. And you can make a pitch just like in a matter of 10 minutes to a writer in Ireland, to a writer around the corner, or at a university radio station or a university newspaper. So I think that the technology now is so on the artist's side. Like, you don't need a publicist to set up a photo shoot, pay someone thousands of dollars to get that great shot. I mean, you could find a friend who has a great 35mm camera or a digital camera, take a great picture, that becomes your picture, and you put it on your Facebook or your MySpace, and it's there for downloading. High-res pictures, that takes so much of his work out of the way and so much of the publicist's work out of the way as well. So I tend more now to electronic press kits. I think there's a great site called Sonic Bids. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with that. They, as an artist, you could sign up and they create an EPK for you, an electronic press kit. And it has your picture, it has some MP3 links, it has a bio, and not only that, but you get all these leads on shows and festivals and things like that you can submit the EPK to, and they'll help you with that process. So, we've moved away. When I was on the venue side as a venue publicist, the talent buyer had press kits up to here on his desk, and he never looked at them. So when we were in his office, we would look through them to see if there were any cool music that we could steal from him. But a lot of it doesn't get looked at. So it's an expensive thing to do. The right bio, well-written bio, a really great picture. So I would venture to the more the DIY side now. Like, get someone great who's a photographer, take a great picture. Start your bio yourself. That's a great exercise for you guys to do. Who, what, when, where, why, who am I? So that if you do hire a publicist, you can give that to them and they can build it up and they can build it into a great bio. But you have to start that process and you own that responsibility. And don't get stuck on or take on, have people pitch you, oh, I can do that for you, pay me $1,200. Don't do that, because you don't know where it's going to lead you. You don't know if it's going to be a great press kit. You don't know if it's going to work. So I'm more underground, do it yourself. Where you need help, like expert writing or something, there's probably people right around you who can help you build your bio, or photographers right around you that can shoot a great picture. And then it's a matter of getting it out and doing the research and pitching it yourself to a degree. And then when you need that publicist who knows where the people are to send it to, then you hire them. But a lot of it depends on what you're bringing to the table right now as far as materials, press materials.
Pick up on two things Laura said. One, a great way to get a first off, where photographs are concerned, photos are one place where the quality of the gear and the quality of the shooter really count. And a great thing to do is to look around town for photographers, people you see at shows, and you'll often find, or look at the magazines and see who in your town shoots, and reach out to them. Like one guy here in town, Zach Smith is the drummer for Rotary Downs. He's also an excellent photographer, and he'll often, for bands he likes, he'll shoot publicity shots for them, partially for practice, partially for experience, and also for a cut rate. Give them so you can get a quality shooter who in a lot of cases understands what you're doing and who knows what a good shot and bad shot looks like. And so look around for other photographers who's in print and approach them, because frequently these people are up for it and will get you, they're going to get something that doesn't look like a snapshot. So that's valuable, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
No, I just want to ask you real quick, so what to you constitutes a good photo? I mean, what do you, as an editor, when you're trying to decide to run this artist photo or this one, what's going to make you choose this one over this? Is there anything in particular that strikes you or you like, you don't like?
Don't look like, four guys standing in an alley always looks like four guys standing in an alley. Four guys standing next to a brick wall often looks like four guys standing in an alley. Four guys standing in an alley looks exactly like four guys standing in an alley. That kind of like lineup never works. So there ought to be some sense of composition, something interesting about it. After you say something interesting about it, there's really not a lot more, because after that it becomes pretty wide open. There's a piece I love that we have in the issue that just came out today, a picture that Zach did for a local band called Living Soundtrack. And they're an instrumental band, and they often play actually accompanying video on the wall behind them. And sort of appropriate for the band, that Zach took the picture of the band. The band's lying on the ground in City Park. Zach is like up on a ladder, up in a tree, or up by a tree, and he's shooting like the crook of a tree. There's an owl there. Like a metal owl. The band is completely out of focus in the background. They're small and in the distance, but it makes complete sense for that band because their image is so much about being a soundtrack that works out great. And that doesn't look like every other photo when I put it in the magazine. I mean, if you can find three other photos just like yours in the magazine, you might as well be four guys standing in an alley.
Well, and I think if you have a photo that's impactful, I'm always telling artists, I would rather have the paper run your photo in one sentence than an article with no photo. Yeah. Because someone's eye is going to go to that photo before they're going to take the time to read the article. And one other thing, too, that just reminded me of, I worked with a band once, and they were a big band, and as far as like number of people, and so all the pub photos they kept giving me were all horizontal, which is fine. But then when the papers would call in one a photo, so many of them would say, "But I could put it on the cover if you have something vertical," and I didn't. And so I guess one suggestion I have would be take vertical and horizontal, because you never know which one you're going to need.
Right. The other thing that Laura said, which I think is valuable, is when you're thinking about the bio, having been on both sides, writing them and reading them, my attitude is a bio ought to give the writer or give the reader about 3 questions, 3 things to talk to you about, so that if the person doesn't know anything about you, they have some idea. Okay, this is interesting. That's interesting. Okay, I can see a reason to talk to this person. I can see a reason to go forward. I had at one point I was writing one for a local band, supergroup, and their label was very excited by the fact that 2 guys in the band are distantly related to Bruce Lee. And they were very insistent, this needs to be in there, this needs to be in there. And I finally asked the guys, if anybody asks you a Bruce Lee question, can you do anything with it that will either make the band look good or or do anything for your image? I said, we got nothing. And so in that case, that doesn't belong. No matter, it might be interesting, but all you're going to get is relatives of Bruce Lee kick rock and roll ass. And you're going to get a whole lot of really dumb, gimmick-oriented headlines, if anybody writes about it. And people are going to ask you questions you can't do anything with, and so you're going to end up looking bad in the process. That you want, basically, consider your bio a way to sort of set the table. Here's the things I want to talk about. That's a way to bring, sort of to hint at, the things you want to talk about, the things you want taken seriously about you as a group, and nobody cares who you opened for.
Another tool that we haven't quite talked about yet, but we're getting close, is the press release. And I guess one of my questions for you all is, when is it appropriate to write a press release? What should they be about, and what should you put in there?
Typically, like, if I have a band going on, like, their first national tour, something that we perceive to be big news, even if it's just for this band, if someone else doesn't think it's big news, then that's when we'll do a press release. And in the press release, we'll include, and a press release you've got to keep pretty condensed. So there's not a 2, 3, 4 page press release. It's probably about 2 paragraphs long. So you don't have a lot of room to work with. You got to, again, hit them up front with the most important information that you want them to have, and a lot of that's going to vary from band to band. Some bands do have interesting backstories about how they got started, or how one of them just kind of fell into the music thing. That you want to look at things that are going to make your band interesting or stand out more. But press releases, as a general rule, are fairly dry. And so you can't be overly creative with them, but you do want to put in the most vital information that's going to want to make somebody want to take a second look at you.
All right.
I think, the basic, you guys probably know this, who, what, when, where, why, how should be answered in that release. You shouldn't be sending something out if you're not telling a story or a call to action. What is it that you want the reader to do? Do you want them to come to the show? Do you want them to do an advanced story? Artists are available for interviews. Do you want it just to be a reminder to Alex or to that writer, guess what, we're doing something else that's really cool? So, the intent of the release is just as important as what's in it. And then part 2 of that is the follow-up. So it's not just alone to send it, but it's something to follow up and ask, did you get my release? It's really cool. We're opening up an ice cream store, and we're going to be playing on the sidewalk. Visually that looks kind of cool, or might be kind of cool to an editor or to a TV station or something like that. So, I would say just the real basics of what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to gain from that release. As a venue publicist, we were tried to pitch, okay, this band is playing here, writer, please come out. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it was always interesting when bands themselves reached out to writers along with us, because sometimes they were more successful at getting the coverage than we were, because we were always pitching. It's really, I think it's cool that a band sends out a release in addition to the venue where you might be playing. It's like a double hit, but it's cooler if it comes from you a little bit.
And this is, too, to kind of follow up on what you're saying about the follow-up, and we've been talking about electronic things. That's why we typically do all of our press releases through the PR Web Newswire. And so everything's out there on the internet, and then what we'll do is track it and see who's picking it up on their own, and then that'll give us some ideas of the press outlets we need to go after. And we can continue it going by just sending out a link instead of, again, putting paper in the mail and cluttering people's desks. So, yeah, the internet has been very vital and very helpful to indie bands, and we try to take full advantage of that.
Now, one of the things that Laura said that I think I want to pick up on was talking about how the club, the artists were often more successful than the club because the club is always pitching. And thinking about when you send out a press release or when you are reaching out becomes kind of a useful thing. One of the things that actually has become a border, it is an irritation, let's not be nice about it, is the people I'll never have less than 5 or 6 pitches, notes a day in my Facebook email letting me know about this date. And it's very clear. There's some people who anytime they play, they always send it out to everybody. And so they notify me whether they're playing Tipitina's or they're playing their Uncle Ted's yard sale or, playing someplace in West Virginia that I can't go to. And so there's no particular logic or selectivity. It's always, we're doing everything. And essentially it works out to be this, and if this is you, learn that this is like pretty much a press release every 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And there's a sense at first, there's a point at which, when I first see it, I kind of feel bad that I can't make this one or can't make that one. There comes a point where it's like, well, now this is kind of a challenge, isn't it? How many of these emails, can I ignore? Well, let's count them up. And you get that weird feeling at times that the band is basically, if I update my Facebook page, I can go back to Madden. And so it becomes, instead of doing other forms of publicity, instead of doing other forms of promotion, instead of postering, instead of working OZ, instead of trying to in some way operate smart, it's basically if I do this first thing in the morning, then I'm done for the day. And instead of like selecting and saying, here's a gig that's an important gig, and this is one, if you want to see it here. Yeah. I'm not going to name names. There's bands who say, I literally am playing Uncle Ted's yard sale. And so, okay, I don't really want to see that because there's a good chance that's going to sound like crap. And there's a good chance I'm going to watch you stand among the refuse while people are ignoring you, walking around, and you're going to come off looking really bad. Whereas when you are on the stage at Tipitina's, you are probably going to look better. And you're probably going to sound better. And this is when you probably want me to see you, rather than at this gig where you actually can't even get your full band there because somebody can't get up that early and Uncle Ted's not paying enough for that gig anyway, and so you're just going to go. So you've got a pickup drummer for the occasion, and that kind of sort of relentless, thoughtless press release via Facebook is really a pretty. Is almost a turnoff rather than being in any way a helpful thing. Select your gigs when you want to tell people about it.
Right. Can I just add that I think bands, Alex kind of alluded to this, that there are so many other concentric circles where you can generate press for your band that's not necessarily just the music publication in your town or in your world. There's the social networking sites are just incredible for creating buzz about your band. There are a lot of fan sites where you can go, hey, we're going to be here. That creates buzz. What you want is like a drum beat about, your band. And by the time that I hear it 3 times, I might look around in my world of the web or reading a paper or seeing a poster on the pole, I'm like, wow, this band is hot. It could be or could not be, but that's what the impression that I get. Just because they're all over my ethosphere, kind of. And that,
Ethosphere?
I don't know if that's a word, but that's how it feels to me. Like when I'm walking and I see suplex, and then I get an email, suplex, and then I read it somewhere, suplex. I'm like, dog, they are on fire. That it sometimes can serve as the tipping point for a writer or an editor or a booker to say, this band is on fire. You may or may not be, but it's just because you're hitting different arenas where people are talking, where they're promoting. There's a website, Pat Jolly News here in New Orleans, and she's just a lady who sends out emails every day. You could send it to her and about what you're doing, your garage sale, show, and she'll send it out to the world, and it comes into my inbox. And I'm like, and I peruse all her things, and some of the things are really interesting, some of them are not. But you will not, her impact is real, and it could translate into at least 5 to 10 people coming to your gig or more. It could translate into a reader, a publicist like me, or a writer like Alex seeing it and going, wow, this band is really out there. So everyone wants, the media wants to be, close to what's hot. And if you appear to be hot, even if you're not, then you could be hot. That's kind of the catch-22.
One thing to pick up off of that, and a little bit off of my Facebook talk, when you're using Facebook or Twitter, they're both great for your purposes. But the thing is, think about what to do besides just raw sales. Instead of selling me all the time, we're playing here, we're playing here, we're playing here, we're playing here, use them to create interest in yourself. Like for instance, that Laura works with the New Orleans Bingo Show, and like and I follow 2 or 3 of them on Twitter. And while they're never specifically hyping, we're doing this today, we're doing that today, that I'll have one of them, or like, no, I mean, here's our gig, here's our gig, here's our gig. One of them will be talking about, we were shooting a video on this today. Or, or saying, sitting in the bar, watching the Lakers game, Lakers are just crushing, but nonetheless, that they're furthering personality, they're furthering themselves as, as somebody who you might be interested in, that they're talking about things they're doing besides the actual gig. So when a gig is coming up, I'm thinking positively about bingo. And I've seen other bands, a number of the New Orleans indie rock bands are doing that well, that there are people who I find their Twitter's interesting, but they're very rarely actually selling me a particular show. I saw, one of them, I think Caddy Wampus was playing in Houston last weekend. I didn't know about it before. They weren't hyping the show before, but they were talking about when they were in Houston doing this, or talking about going out here afterwards, after the show. And so kind of they're trying to involve you as a reader in their world. And so that you've got, so kind of like sort of the cumulative effect is at some point, you kind of want to know what are these guys about. So using these different social media as a way to draw people in and as a way to essentially shape and develop your brand is way more effective than just, I'm playing everywhere, here are all my gigs. Why don't you set up your own fan page where you can put your gigs so I can go find them there if I really want to find them?
Well, I agree, and I think these days it's all about repeated impressions, like Laura was saying. You pretty much have to do everything now, where in the old days, all you had to worry about was putting some posters up and calling Alex. Now you really do have to do everything. And I've had bands ask me, well, why should I get up at 6 a.m. and do the Fox News show? That's not going to sell tickets. And I said, well, maybe tonight it won't sell tickets, but maybe someone will see you on TV. Then in a week, their friend will say, hey, I went to the show. And then a couple weeks later, you'll see the record out somewhere. It just accumulates over and over time.
Right, and it actually does sell tickets. It's, because we had a band in Atlanta recently and put them on there, and this is a hard rock band, and trust me, they're not anywhere at 7 a.m., but they understood the importance of doing it, and that night, the lead singers ran over there, come on, I got to get you to meet these guys, and I'm like, what? They saw us on Fox this morning, so actually people do see you on there and come out, so, yeah.
I tell you, I had, unrelated to this, but kind of an experience that I thought that has told me a lot of truth for the future. A number of years ago, a friend and I did a documentary on the financial realities of making contemporary art. And we invited a wide spectrum of artists to come in to be interviewed and to be a part of this, part of the process. And what we noticed was that the artists who were making money, the people who were actually selling and were actually in the marketplace, showed up first thing in the morning. They showed up between 8 and 9:30, and they showed up between 4:30 and 6. The people who showed up in the middle of the day, and a few of them showed up at lunch, people who showed up between, say, 10 and noon and between 1 and 4, that they still had studios full of work that nobody had ever seen, a lot of unsold stuff. And what we found was that the people who actually got up, people went to work, tended to be people who also successfully worked. And I find over and over that that the bands that are selling, bands that are working, bands that are getting gigs, bands that are traveling, are doing business at 9 in the morning. That the bands who I can't reach until around 11, 12, 1, that frequently are bands that they're playing a gig here, gig there, and you kind of feeling that it's as much hobby as it is a true, as it is an actual profession. So, I've come to respect the early riser, and to some degree, there's that point where get up at 9 in the morning and do something before you turn on the Madden. So.
I wanted to just.
I actually like Madden, by the
Yeah.
way. I don't want to have an anti-Madden issue here. It's just.
Yeah, I don't know how to play Madden, but
I
Alex
wanna play you.
mentioned branding, and I wanted to expound a little bit on that because I think that's kind of where my head is at right now for artists is what is your brand? Besides just what kind of music you play, what lifestyle are you representing? Are you hip and cutting edge, stylish, adventurous, conservative or reflective, or what are those adjectives that could describe your band, and then how does that reflect itself on your logo for your band? How you write the name of your band, and because that is going to be what is going to represent you in print and in visuals and on merchandise. And I think that's the direction, that's what's causing traction with a lot of artists right now, is that they seem to be more than just music, and it's weird to state it, but I think that your website, your Facebook page, your logo, your T-shirt, your press kit, whatever decal you create. I think of people like, Preservation Hall Jazz Band, of course, they've had a logo and a brand since 1961, but now, one of the challenges with them was to make it hipper and younger and attract a younger audience. They didn't change the brand, they just introduced the music and their lifestyle to a young audience in the last couple of years. And so now people are talking about them more, they're getting a little bit more attention, and the same with the New Orleans Bingo Show, the iconic image of Ronnie kind of, it's as much as imaging and branding as is, let me put a press kit together, so keep that in mind and let it percolate a little bit, because you can position yourself as a unique entity if you start thinking of yourself and your band and your music as more of a brand and as a lifestyle that I'm selling, versus just flavor of the month band, kind of.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say for me, it's totally a case-by-case basis. It depends on the artist. It depends on what you're looking for. Are you hiring me to promote a new record? Are you hiring me to promote a handful of dates, 20 dates, 30 dates? Usually, if it's a new record, I like to have a 3-month minimum because it takes that long to build the materials, get the word out, make all the follow-up calls. Primarily, I think generally it's usually a monthly retainer that you pay for. And again, you know, I know some artists are like, well, can I just pay you for what you get? Well, you don't pay a lawyer if he wins. I mean, you're paying us for our, well, I mean, you're paying us for our time and our connections. And,
Exactly.
you know, I'm sure most of us put in more time than what we're even getting paid for, but we do it because we love what we do. And, you know, all we can promise you is that we'll try and we'll make the calls and we'll send the emails and we'll write the releases. But at the end of the day, we can't force Alex to write about you or, you know, I mean, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But
And
Is there a
that's,
price range?
Well, I charge per hour, and my hourly rate is going to vary depending on the band. If it's Justin Timberlake, he's really paying me. But if it's an indie band, then I'm going to work within your budget, you know, as long as we're both happy with, you know, can come up with a solution that works for both of us. I have one band I manage, they get press free. So it just depends on my relationship with the band and what you're looking for.
I think it's, for me, you know, I've worked both on retainers and I've worked for free as well. I think it's really, it depends on your pitch to the publicist, is really about what you would like to get from them and what your drive is. And I think, you know, if I have an artist that I love to death and I've been working with him for a million years and I've never charged him anything, I just love I'm invested in his career and I want him to be successful. Then there are other people that, you know, I get a monthly retainer for. So it really is on how you're going to approach a person that you think could help you. You know, it depends on that. I don't think I really want bands can spend a lot of money on publicists and it could not work. And so you have to go into it with a really smart thinking as to what you want to get out of that publicist relationship. And there is a trend right now, you know, I don't know who's doing it, that fee based on performance. You know, you got me the cover, you got a story, you got a picture, and then that is calculated at a certain rate. I've just read about it. I don't know anyone who's doing it.
Yeah.
So
That'll never happen in my world.
So it really depends.
Did we receive other questions?
other questions from anyone?
Oh, I have worked for free. Yeah, I have done that, absolutely, and I'm still doing it. So it just depends on the band, and it depends on what kind of a future I see for them. Absolutely.
But it's a good idea to assume first that you're actually going to have to pay the publicist. Because first off, one of the things I'm always amused by is I often will have people from out of town will write in saying, you know, can you review our record? And I'll tell them, like, since, you know, here are kind of my priorities. So you are a low priority. So unless your record is really absolutely a work of genius, it probably is not going to make the cut. 99% of the time they send it. You know, I am a work of genius. And 99% of the time I don't find it a work of genius. And it doesn't just go, unfortunately, it sort of goes in the side box. So, you know, don't assume that that you are the genius and the publicist is going to want to work for you free. And also you're going to find a better relationship with publicists if you come in offering money first and let them say, oh no, I love your work, rather than coming in and say, hey, love me yet? So.
And I think everybody has to keep in mind, too, that publicists are human and we have our likes and dislikes. And it's really difficult for me to push a genre of music that I don't get. You know, if I don't understand what they do, then it's not fair to you either to hire me. because I'm not going to be the one that pushes you over the edge. But at the same time, if you bring something to me and I really believe in it, I will push you to the ends of the earth. So you have to keep that in mind too, that you're pairing up with the right person, especially before you spend money.
Yeah.
Oh, press releases, that's when I was talking about the PR Web Newswire. And PR, P is in Paul, R is in Robert, Web Newswire, and I think that's their URL.com. And those, of course, you're going to pay a publishing fee for that. So your publicist, like me, for example, yeah, I'm going to bill something into that compensates me for my time for writing it. So, your publicist is going to quote you a flat rate. And even if I have a retainer client, those press releases are separate animals, and they all have separate rates depending on the level of release that I feel like you need at a given time. It's not worth it to spend, like the lowest level, I've never actually seen any use in it at all. So we usually start in the middle, but when you start going up to I call it the bells and whistles press release, because it goes through the AP wire, and so that's got to be a major announcement, and they're not cheap. So you might want to look at their site, look around. You can look around there and get some idea of what it's about. Well, it's not, I don't know that publicists per se work in genres. I've worked with pop rock, I've worked with blues rock, I've worked with straight blues. We've got a pretty hard rocking band now that's rock alternative. I don't know that publicists, some might stick with specific genres, but we don't. I don't think it does. I think what's going to matter from your perspective is that publicist's track record. What has he or she done that's even going to attract you to us. It's definitely not a one-way street. So, I encourage you to do your research and compare them to other publicists and what they're doing, and don't let it just boil down to the money. Just because somebody charges you more doesn't mean they're better. What you want to see is what they've done. That's what matters.
Actually, I'm not sure I agree with you on this one. I understand, because I know people who I see different publicists who handle a variety of things, but I also tend to find like there's one publicist who's a friend in Los Angeles who handles almost entirely Americana. And over the years, I kind of know his taste, and there are things that he represents I have no interest in. But in general, I tend to, his tastes tend to be pretty good, and so I tend to be interested in stuff that comes through him. And there's also there's someone who does primarily electronica, and a lot of the stuff that she handles I tend to like. And even if I didn't know the artist, I tend to like the artist that Laura works with. And so I really rarely found Laura to be handling someone I go, ew. And so over the long haul, probably on an individual basis, you may or may not notice it. But as an editor who deals with publicists all day, that there are people whose tastes are more reliable, or people whose name they crossed my path, and I realized that this person almost entirely deals with metal. There's one metal company that's really pretty aggressive, which I respect. They represent their artists well. It's unfortunately it's very hard for me to use a lot of metal hype, and so a lot of what they do I can't do much with. But with that said, if they were representing something besides metal, I probably wouldn't know, because so much of what they do is metal that I probably wouldn't even notice it anymore. I look at their stuff pretty quickly to see if it's coming to town. That's about as close as I look. And the other part is a person who does, anyone up here who's professional can do a job well, or they would tell you, I can't do your job. At the same time, there are things that Sue could sell better than others, and there are things that Laura could push better than others. And so my friend in LA understands Americana really well, and he loves roots rock, and so he knows how to move it. He knows how to talk about it. And so finding someone in your genre who understands your genre isn't necessary, but it's probably going to make the process easier.
I think there's also a difference between publicists who do corporate type publicity and then the music type publicists as well. Not all publicists are equal in terms of expertise in a particular area. So that's important, and I've learned that through working with other publicists that are, say, they're responsible for a hotel, and and whether or not they can promote music as well as a music publicist, there's a difference. Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
That count, yeah.
Can be both.
Well,
It
industry is a
depends.
genre in a sense.
Yeah.
I think too, when looking to hire a publicist, like she said, you really want to check their track record. Ask them, what have you done? Where have you gotten articles placed? What TV shows have you gotten people on? And then call some of their clients and ask them, hey, I'm thinking about hiring her. What do you think? Did she work for you? I worked at a label for 15 years, and part of my job was to be the label publicist, but then I also had to hire out. And one thing I noticed was sometimes I would hire somebody for 3 different records in a row, and they would do great on 2 of them, but not so good on the other. And I think, do you go, well, was it just the record did not click, or was I not on their case enough about it? Because the squeaky wheel, we all know. And so even though you hire a publicist to work for you, it's your job to push your publicist too and check in with them. Make sure you're getting, weekly reports. Make sure, you're keeping them, up to date with new things you're doing, so that you have to sell them too on a constant basis. So,
I've sometimes found that some of the least effective publicists have been associated with record labels, and it's, I think, because you not among them. But I don't know if I dealt with you when you were at a label, actually. So, but often it's the case of somebody who's got to handle whatever the label has. And there are points where when you're talking to someone and realize they have no idea what they're talking about. They've got the selling points, they've got the call list, they've got the goal, the target number or whatever, and that's what they've got. And whereas the independent publicist who has some specialty, actually has some interest, knows how to talk about it, and if they're pitching me, I feel like I'm being pitched fairly honestly by somebody who can genuinely see what's good about it, rather than somebody who can tell me what they're told to say is good about it.
And it's also reflective on who you are. If a publicist, again, going to that corporate kind of mentality, or is a someone that's in another mental space than where your band is and your lifestyle is, then that might not be the best fit. Because there are publicists that are not great as well, that are pushy, or Alex will duck their calls, and you don't want a publicist that's representing your wonderful new project to be that person that people are ducking. And there's a group of publicists that kind of fall into that category too.
That's
I won't tell.
Well, I think
in
that's
the middle
the
of the room.
research issue again too,
your
because
homework.
you know what, that person isn't probably going to be very successful getting their bands on anything, and then you're going to find the opposite publicist who just, I don't know, has the gift of gab, has the magic formula that everybody they meet is their friend, and they have a lot of success with that. But yeah, the ducking people, I think it's going to be pretty clear that you've run up on one of those. And a lot of times they're going to, as I like to call it, smoke blowing. You have a lot of smoke blowing in this industry. And so a lot of times I judge people on how much they talk to me. you know, how much they claim they've done, and I know this person, and immediately the bells start going off. So, you know, if somebody talks a good game to you, they better have it on paper somewhere.
Middle of the room.
When you say, I've heard people say agents a lot of times. An agent and a publicist really aren't the same thing.
No.
No, you hire an agent to, they book the gigs for you, and a publicist gets publicity, basically spreads the word about you where it doesn't cost you money. I mean, I'm saying, you know, you could run an ad in a paper, but it's our job to get that editorial for free that you don't have to pay for. So it's a publicist's job to spread the word. It's the agent's job to get you the gigs.
I always think it works best to be about as honest as you can manage. I mean, there's always going to be an element of that. That first off, you know, there's always going to be an element of selling. That I think is one of the things anybody who's a musician has to make peace with is if you're playing for yourself in your rehearsal studio, you're pure. If that's the only time you ever play, that's when you play, that's good. Once you decide that somebody else should hear it, you're now in the business of selling. Once you're in the business that someone else should take this home and listen to it, you're in the business of selling. Make the peace with it, deal with it. So there's going to be an element of selling. And so there's a point where if what you have to sell is a sizzle, sell the sizzle. You know, if you have nothing to back it up with, then you've got a problem. But, you know, at least it gets you in the door, gets you listened to, gets someone to at least think about your music. So go with it. Just, you know, always say, try to deal about as honestly as you can. Because if someone feels like, you know, feels like that they just got sideshowed, then they're not interested. And the same way, if you get a publicist, you try to get a publicist and are talking to them saying, we're going to do this, or we got this going on, or we got this great we have this, you know, thing about to happen, and it's actually not, and it was a little more than a drunk talk with somebody who's the brother of a label guy at 2 a.m. There's a good chance that then when whoever you talk to, whatever publicist you approach, finds out that's all you've got, you know, they get away from you pretty fast, and then you become one of those stories people tell. And you never want to be the story people tell.
I've pretty much got a policy, though, that if I can't put it on paper, if I can't tell you it's a done deal, I'm not using it. Those things always come back and bite you in the you-know-what. And it's just not a good idea. I mean, I'm okay with embellishing, but just outward lying or taking something and turning it into something else is just not a good idea.
We have a couple more minutes if anybody else has any questions. I would say one of the number one things besides having a MySpace and a website is start to collect email addresses of her fans. To me, that's number one. Because those are people that you already know are the fans that you can blast every month as long as you have news to report. And they will stay with her and they'll be there for her. So for me, that would be number one.
And one thing I would say is the one thing not to do is start pushing for features, because for two reasons. I mean, they even start pressing for any serious write-up, because one thing people don't realize is that the press, the media, press really acts like a megaphone or a microphone. If someone's talking, if there's a buzz, we can make the buzz a lot louder. But if there is no buzz, nothing happens. And it makes it harder, and if we write something now, it makes it harder to go back to it a year later when something might have started because we've already told the story once. And so it doesn't, that often people want, tell my story now. And there's a good chance the story isn't ready right now. And so what you really need is I think connected to Sue's thoughts on the email, you need to start a community of people that are interested. And ultimately, because one of the things we're seeing right now, that with the internet, with Twitter, with Facebook, with all social media, and with even the way the music business is going, as major labels are struggling, we're seeing more and more music is all about community. That conversations are all about community. Facebook is all about community. And so what you really want is you need a community. That once you've got people who, because there comes a point where people are going to your band, your artist show, not even because of the artist, they like the artist, but because they like the people who are also going to the show. And then as your community grows, then there are also people who are out there selling for you. There are people who are fans of that band who are telling their friends, who are bringing their friends. They're doing your sales work for you. And then you have other people who are saying, why aren't you covering this band? Then you have someone else besides you who's on Twitter saying, such and such was great on the weekend. And again, as you start hearing, as Laura said earlier, when you get somebody who's not the artist, and not obviously connected to the artist, saying, great show by such and such on the weekend, and you see their name over here, and you see them talked about in this conversation, then you start to say, maybe there's a story here, and it's time for me to get on it. So your first job is the job of community building. You've succeeded at the point when other people are doing your work for you.
When it's viral.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jack.
For me, it really is important. It's critical almost. I wish I had more time to do that. The artists that are successful, or the publicists or even agents that are successful, know what's happening on the ground, know what's bubbling up. Like, I've been dying to go see this band. My name is Michael. Only because I've seen it everywhere, and I'm like, I gotta get to see this band, and I haven't had a chance to. But everywhere I look, or a poster that I'm walking down Decatur Street and I see their poster. I pick up a magazine, I see their name. I look at Facebook and people are their friends. It's like, well, who is this band? So it's critical for me as someone who's trying to sell music to know what's happening. And it's moving so fast, and bands are being so successful on their own without getting anointed that it's like, I feel like I'm behind the gun always on discovering the new band. Like, it's being discovered without me knowing. And I'm like, so I'm chasing behind that, and I'm listening to links, I'm listening to MP3s, I'm listening in 30 seconds just so I could go, oh, wow, that's cool, or, oh, I don't like that. So it's really important.
I'm out some. I'm not out nearly as much as I used to be. But I think one thing everyone here at the table would say is, when you're at a desk for 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, writing about music, thinking about music, working on music, that when you get up in the morning, you get in the car on the way in, that you're listening to music, that frequently at the end of the night, that to now that I've been on the clock for 9 or 10 hours, do I feel like going on the clock some more? And the fact is, I mean, I think I suspect it's true for all of us. I know it's true for Laura because I run into her and out and about. If I go to the French Quarter to see a band, I'm really still at the office. That I will have people come up and want to talk business. I want to have people who want to tell me about their bands. I have people who want to come up and take issue with something in the magazine. And by the way, those 12:30 in the morning after a bunch of beers, those conversations about what's wrong with the magazine are my favorites. So, on one hand, I try to be out. I mean, one of the things I always make a point of is I'm one of the first that at Jazz Fest every year, I see the 11 o'clock, the first shows each day. That I'm one of the few people, I'm one of the few people in the media who's going to see the first bands. Because I want to see, partially because I like that when it's got space, but also seeing bands who are often excited because it's their first Jazz Fest, and seeing people who are, to some extent, it's the point at which they're also emerging to a degree that they are in a really public space. That's not the only time I see them, and I do go out, and actually one of my goals right now is to get out more. But there is the point where after you spent the whole day dealing with music, that's not really what you want anymore.
Well, and, I think everyone's pressed for time, and I wish there was another 24 hours in the day. But one thing that I've been able to do is just ask other people in the business, like ask, my local PD at the radio station, ask the club, club owner at, the local club in my town, what's hot, who should I go see, what's going on, ask Alex, hey, what's going on? Because people love to tell you what they're passionate about, and to me, that's one really good way to kind of find out what's going on.
I actually do go out quite a bit, but that's because I'm a party girl. No, seriously. Our agency actually gets hit up a lot, and I know from dealing with indie bands that oftentimes they are 10 times better live than they are on the CD. So I may hear your music online, but I want to hear and see you do it live. So I'm actually out there quite a bit, and the problem for you, Alex, is you're famous, so nobody knows who I am. So I can do that, and nobody bothers me all night. But we actually do that quite a bit.
But and the other part is, though, when I'm not out, I am talking to people about who they're seeing, and I do know a number of people who are out and about and finding out what they're seeing, and people are telling me what because I want to see a band when it's I want to see a band when it's ready to be seen. I usually figure a band's ready to be seen once they've thrown away what they used to think was their best song. That's that's the point of when a band has actually kind of figured out who it is, and figured out their personality, figured out their music, figured out they got the act together, and that's the time I want to see them. So I kind of don't want to see a band for the first 6 months. I want to wait until they've had time to grow up a little bit, and fire a member and. Get past just being a bunch of buds getting out and playing some gigs, and get to the point where at least where they've realized if we really want this to be more than just something to do for beer money on Saturday night. At the point when the band's starting to make that consciousness shift, and they're actually smart enough to recognize what was once a really good idea now is a very average idea, and they've got better ones. That's the point when I want to start hearing them.
Well, we're out of time, everyone, but thank you very much. We appreciate you, and if you have any questions for anyone specific, you feel free to come up and ask us.
Well, that was fun.